Hello, my name is Isaac Creager, and today I'm going to talk about understanding the American dream. As I become a more matured and developed composer, I'm beginning to realize how significant being a part of the American working class has been to my development as a person. Through all my life and into my first year at college, I was a right-leaning libertarian Christian. I firmly believe that in this country, everybody can better their situation and work out of whatever struggle they were faced with. I believe that with grit and hard work, anything could be achieved. Essentially, I truly believed in the classic idea of the American dream, which the Oxford Learner's Dictionary is defined as the belief that America offers the opportunity to everyone of a good and successful life achieved through hard work. These beliefs developed because of my parents and where I was born and were reinforced by my experience of being self-taught in composition. I picked up music composition in high school and taught myself through studying scores on the internet and listening intently. I spent hours each day just looking at symphonic scores and reverse engineering music theory and orchestration. Using what I learned from self-study, I composed my first symphony as well as a few smaller works. After originally getting into UC as a criminal justice major, I realized I'd just rather do music. The works I wrote in high school formed my application to UC's College Conservatory of Music, or CCM. I received my CCM acceptance letter in spring of 2019. For the first time, I was excited for school and hopeful about my future. High school had been difficult for me due to my generalized anxiety disorder, and I felt like this letter was the beginning of a lot of positive change for myself. In my head, I had through my own efforts become a proficient enough composer to be accepted into a well-respected music school. I felt that if I could do this, then anybody could teach themselves anything and mold life into whatever they desired. The same spring I got my CCM acceptance letter, my dad was unexpectedly and unfairly fired from his job. To help offset the financial burden that would come, I decided that for that summer I would pick up a job to help in any way I could. I worked May through August 2019 at Honda of America's Marysville Auto Plant, or MAP for short. MAP is essentially a giant assembly line, where the vehicles travel through each department on a conveyor until completion. I got put on the Accord portion of the factory, and I was assigned to their weld department in Area C1. I worked second shift, meaning 5 p.m. to 1:30 a.m., with regular mandatory overtime that would have me staying a few hours over or having to work an extra 6 day a week. The summer of working this job was physical and mental torture. I felt like my body was being slowly destroyed each week until the end of Friday. We worked in this hot factory wearing heavy cotton uniforms, Kevlar gloves, bump caps, goggles, and steel-toed boots. I would spend my shifts picking up heavy things like trunks and hoods and installing them to the car while it was moving. I put on bulkheads, installed fenders, and learned every process in my area. Most days our line would be told to keep moving through lunch, meaning capable people would have to work 2 processes at once while we took turns on lunch break. I remember many times I just didn't get to eat because the lunchroom was closed by the time I was able to go. We were around old machinery from when the factory was built in 1982 that was dangerous and constantly failed. One time I watched a door machine, which is a large tunnel that places the doors on the cars, smash a cord in with its arms and crush it into a metal mess. I vividly remember another time where a coworker wasn't paying attention to her surroundings and cut my neck with a sharp metal car part. Any deeper than what it ended up being could have resulted in serious injury. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2019 there were 5,333 fatal workplace injuries, the highest annual amount since 2007. This job, coupled with what was going on in my personal life, gnawed away at my mind. My at-the-time girlfriend was getting frustrated with me for constantly being exhausted and worried about finances. I in turn was getting frustrated with her for not understanding the difficulty of my situation, and we mutually decided to separate. My home life was difficult too as my parents began fighting about financial decisions and the fact that my dad was struggling to find a new job. I had zero time to compose or do anything productive because in the time I wasn't working I was trying to recover from work physically and mentally. I didn't have any friends at the time either, so after losing my girlfriend I was completely alone. One recurring dream from the time ended with me sitting on a hill watching a sunset, where everything in my life was fixed. I'd often wake up thinking that dream was reality, and slowly realizing it wasn't, wishing that I had died in my sleep. The following fall semester was very difficult. I could not sleep without having similar night terrors to what I was having that last summer. My dad found a job in October, but my family was still crippled. I began to seriously struggle with many of the beliefs I previously held. How is one supposed to escape poverty if the jobs they work barely have any time off to allow someone to better themselves? I thought the American dream applied to everyone, but that last summer I lacked the energy, time, and funds to put any serious time into composition for 4 whole months. This vastly contrasted to my high school experience of being able to learn on my own, because in the working class scenario I had zero free time to allocate. Income inequality was entering my consciousness as well. In 2016, the bottom 50% of Americans only owned 1% of total U.S. wealth. When I learned the gap was that monstrous, I felt rage at those who I was working for. I physically and mentally destroyed myself and barely made a fraction of what those who told me to do made. In the spring of 2020, with the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, many companies had to do shutdowns. Since my dad was newer to the company that he just got hired into, he was on the chopping block. He lost his new job, and yet again we were thrown into financial hardship. This hurt my chances to get any private loans, as at this point my father could no longer be my co-signer, and I had no one else willing and able. If I wanted to attend CCM for another year, I would have to work at Honda once again, despite the ongoing pandemic. I knew I could not emotionally withstand that environment without some sort of way to heal, so I decided to compose a string quartet as an active way to process my experiences. I worked on my piece Hollow through the spring of 2020 and until the end of that summer. The first movement, titled The Unbreaking, is in reference to a specific person I knew who I will refer to as Griff. Griff is a 28-year-old Marine veteran. I became good friends with him, and over time he very slowly opened up on his life. Griff was working through a divorce with a physically abusive wife. Wartime had left him with devastating PTSD. Well, we have very different life experiences, and we're very different people. We bonded over things such as having difficulty sleeping due to traumatic experiences. The main theme in this movement is stated alone, and then compounding into a dissonant canon at the minor third. The B section of this music is much more tender, showing the fragility underneath Griff's hard exterior. As it transitions to A prime, the music becomes heavy, dissonant, and loud. The unbreaking is in reference to how Griff presents himself as an unfaltering wall in the face of struggle, and my music reflects the lonely and broken person underneath the shell. Movement 2, The Fighter, is moved into without break from the first movement. It is frantic and filled with constant eighth-note motion. The Fighter depicts the attempt at a betterment of one's situation, but failing despite the utmost effort. The movement depicts this failure by subverting expectations. After a loud climax, the players swap to a very quiet molto sul ponticello playing. They quietly play motifs present from the first part of the movement, and then decrescendo to nothing and glissando upwards. The metallic sound of molto sul ponticello reflects the industrial environment of Honda infecting the music, and the decrescendo to nothing reflects how that environment subdues the mind of those working in it. The third movement is a break from the intensity of 1 and 2. It is titled Wistful Song and reflective of a story one of my coworkers shared with me. In summary, this person I'll refer to as Eric was sharing with me that before he had to work full-time, he loved powerlifting, playing drums, and reading. After getting married to and having kids with the girl he loved, he had to provide for his family. Now all his time is spent at Honda working, and he feels like he lost himself when he lost time to partake in his interests. I loved getting paired with Eric because we would discuss music and all the things we wished we could be doing instead of carrying and installing hoods on Honda Accords. Eric is not alone in feeling depressed about long working hours. A study published in the Scandinavian Journal of Work, Environment, and Health found a correlation between depressive symptomology and long working hours. One of the positive parts of working at Honda was meeting all these vastly different people and hearing about what they like to do. Almost all of them would say some variation of the same thing. Oh, I used to love this when I was younger, but I had to grow up and work. To me, this was deeply disturbing and an indicator that in America we look at labor and work with an extremely toxic mindset. When working takes over your life completely and leaves you with no time to do what you love, why even spend the time working? My quartet ends with the fourth movement named The Husk. This movement represents the inevitable conclusion of being stuck at one of these jobs for decades of your life. I take themes from previous movements and utilize different instrument techniques to represent the soul being torn from the people these themes represent. One example instrument technique is calling for no vibrato at the end. After 17 minutes of music with vibrato, suddenly pulling it from the music adds a sense of desolation. An older gentleman, I'll refer to as Rich, was 1 month away from retirement when I last talked to him. He had been at Honda and worked similar jobs before for a very long time. I would do my best to get to know him and ask what he likes to do, but he would always answer, "Oh, I never got to do anything. I had to work." He did not talk, but on the rarest occasion. His back and hips were literally destroyed from decades of bending over in cars and welding. Rich is an example of what happens when someone slaves their entire life away for just enough to survive, but not enough to live. I saw Rich as someone I could have become if I was not able to go to school. To get to a place of change, we need to alter our collective consciousness of how we view and discuss the working class. There's an article published on WOSU Public Media titled, "Marysville Honda Plant Forces Office Employees to Work the Assembly Line." This piece is by Paige Flagger and is one of the most enraging things I've ever read. It was published July 29, 2020, from the same time I was employed, and is about how COVID was causing staffing problems for Marysville Auto's plant, making it difficult to hit production goals. In this piece, an anonymous office worker is interviewed and discussing how they're upset that office employees are being told to work on the floor with the rest of the employees. He states, "I was not very happy about having to work on the line because I've really tried hard to socially distance and keep away from other people during this. So I felt like being forced to go onto the floor where I know people have had COVID and tested positive for it. I felt very uncomfortable with that." It is absolutely demeaning to hear this office worker discuss how fearful he is of COVID and how the labor shortage is making him do something he doesn't want to, without the acknowledgement of the laborers currently on the line. How can we expect to fix the problems in our country when we just ignore and disregard the physical safety and mental stability of blue-collar America? I think it was insane any of us had to work away from home during that time. My father has since found a job that pays very well, and my family is slowly financially recovering and emotionally healing. However, I realized that my old perspective was simply not representative of reality. My view on the American dream has since changed. I no longer see it as being what you can currently do in America, but more about what America should be striving for. I see the American dream now closer to how it was articulated by James Truslow Adams in his 1931 book, The Epic of America. Adams writes, "The American dream is that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement." This sharply contrasts to my previous understanding of the definition, which was saying America is currently a place where anyone can achieve anything. That just is not the case. We need to fix foundational economic problems in our system, such as income inequality, and change the way we treat and think about the laboring class of our country, if we ever hope to have a place where the theoretical American dream truly can be realized by everyone.